So, General, I wanna kick it off with a very broad question. Slayman and
Hmm.
Nick have got a lot of questions themselves,
Hmm.
but I wanna talk about the world we live in today. And I look at myself as someone who is very naive. I'm just gonna mute you, General, and then you can unmute whenever you speak, just because there's a bit of background noise on your end. So just press the mic button, before speaking. So I was pretty naive, just a couple of years ago, obviously before the Ukraine war. I thought with the world we live in today, the internationalization of the world, a risk of direct or indirect conflicts between any of the large militaries is extremely unlikely, close to impossible. I did not expect what happened in Ukraine. I'm sure others did, and it kind of came to a shock for me and for others. And now we're seeing the tensions in China with Taiwan, and people are talking. We saw the leak just a couple of years ago. I can't remember what it was, from Mike Minahan, a leaked document regarding his concerns between a conflict between the U.S. and China. So I want to get an update, just a kind of an insight from your end about the world we live in today. Are we overreacting? How concerned should we be? What are the risks of any direct conflicts between any of the large superpowers? We're talking about China, Russia, and the US. I've got a lot more questions about AI, but I want to start there if you don't mind, General. You just got to unmute,
Yeah,
bottom left
I
corner,
got it.
please.
I got
Thanks.
it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a big question, and I'll try to be as complete and brief as possible. We're at a huge crossroads right now. So when you say the world, I'm going to bring it to America first, and then I'll talk about the sort of the globe and the global alliance that's formed, not forming, formed against America. So America is at a place right now where we have, if we project ourselves to 2024 and we have the same outcome as 2020 and 2022, then America as we know it is done. And that's a big statement, but I am one to have studied world history, the rise and fall of nation states. We can talk about Athens, we can talk about Rome, we can talk about the Byzantine Empire if you want, but we are meeting all of the indicators and warnings for the decline of a nation state like I've never seen and I never ever thought that I would see in my lifetime. And it's all down to who controls the levers of power in the United States of America. And we can get into maybe questions. We can get into the unrestricted nature of warfare because it's one of the most important unrestricted components of warfare is economic warfare. And if you haven't been paying attention, there's another mid-sized bank that collapsed, and we're having a consolidation, which is the phrase "too big to fail." We're having a consolidation here in the United States to probably four banks, and so if anybody that's on this that remembers summer of 2008, summer of 2008, only a few months later, the entire financial system collapsed. So we're in one of those places right now. I'm not going to say that the financial system is going to collapse, but I will tell you that we are in a place where financially, globally, we are shifting from and off of the U.S. dollar. So without going through all of the borders collapsing, drug overdoses, crime on the streets, a two-party system where one of the parties is completely co-opted by a Marxist movement, and the other party is lost in the woods. Okay, uh, I can address as many of those questions that I can get to, but the other side is the globe. So the wars that you're talking about, and we are now talking about, and the war in Ukraine didn't start a couple of years ago, or started in 2014. Actually, if you go back to 1939, but it started for sure in 2014, the February of 2014 to be specific, and in fact February 28th to be very specific. It was right after the Sochi Olympics. Is when the first time that Russia attacked the two Donbasses and the Crimea, and that's been going on and festering. It stopped It stopped after the Obama administration. It just stopped. And then it kicked back in when the Biden administration came in. And now we are talking about the use of nuclear weapons, which should not be addressed at all. They should never be on the table for this
General
kind of
Flynn,
thing.
just a quick one on that. In your view, why did it stop during President Trump's administration, which is what you're alluding to?
Because of uncertainty in Putin's mind. Okay? Because of uncertainty in Putin's mind. When you don't know what what the other side will potentially do, then you have to check yourself and hold and see where things go. They didn't leave the Donbasses. They didn't leave Crimea. They just didn't put any more pressure there. And frankly, one of the things that Trump was able to do was he kept NATO from this constant, idea of expanding. Okay. And, I could go into the Partners for Peace agreements.
So I've got a couple of questions for you on that.
And
so
then,
the first, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go
ahead. I
was
going to say about China, because that's just one piece of the world. Okay. China is the other side, and China is encroaching on things called air defense engagement zones, sea engagement zones. So the sea lines of communication, the air lines of communication. China has been pushing and pushing and pushing and talk about going up to the line and crossing the line in and around the Sea of Japan, the South China Sea, in that area around Taiwan, because Taiwan is not about technology and chips, which everybody always read about. Well, Taiwan makes 75% of the world's chips. That's all bullshit. Taiwan is about that whole issue out there is about one China, and it goes back to the days of Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, where they actually fought together, and then they had a breaking apart, and Mao made it his life to say, I am not going to let Chiang Kai-shek get away with that, and he did for his lifetime, and there's been 6 leaders since Mao in China. We now have Xi for life. But there's really only been 4. There's really only been 4 leaders. Each one of those leaders has gotten stronger and stronger. And in Xi's case, what he's done is he's made the Chinese economy, right now it's probably it's still second, but it's really close to being the strongest economy in the world. And that, without firing a shot, China basically dominates the United States of America right now in many, many respects.
Yeah, so General, yeah, go ahead, Nick. I'm gonna geek out. I've got so many questions. Do you want to go first, Nick, and then I'll go after you, or do you want me to go first?
Well, actually, you know what? You go first. You're probably the same question.
Real quick, Mario, can you look for what I just sent you in the message behind the scene there? Thanks.
Sure, of course, I'll check it out. General, I'm just gonna ask you a question. I'll check Jim's message.
Mm-hmm.
So you've touched on many points and many points of concern. You've touched on AI, which we'll talk about in a bit. You've touched on the risk of the de-dollarization risk that has been dominating the narrative in the finance world for the last few months. The economic warfare and the concept of too big to fail. We talked about the Ukraine war and obviously the tensions in China. The last point you talked about was Taiwan. Now, and you hinted at China catching up to the US and the risk of China becoming more powerful militarily than the US. How did that happen so quickly? And is it genuinely close to the US that outspends China and has been outspending China for so long?
Well, let me just say it like this. If we outspend the next 10 countries on education combined, and yet we're like number 30 in developed nations around the world in education, in elementary and secondary education, okay? So that stat ought to tell you everything you want to know about the rise of the Chinese military and the direction that the Chinese military has gone. Between 2020 and 2030, we're going to see a China that doesn't put aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf. They don't put aircraft carriers in the Med. They don't put aircraft carriers in the Atlantic. They put them out in the Pacific. And so people will go, well, we have, 10 aircraft carriers. They're not all at sea, all the time. China right now, and I would say in the next 2 years, probably 3 years, China will likely have 3 aircraft carriers, which is a big, big deal. And then you put all the, the corvettes and the destroyers and all the other types of naval craft, in addition to submarines, the subsurface fleet. And people, the guys in the Navy or veterans will go, well, they got diesel. Yeah, they got a shitload of them. And they're also developing nuclear capabilities undersea. So how do they get there so fast? When you build something in the United States, we'll build a great capability. Okay. We'll take 10 years. The contractors will make it go 20 years because they can soak the taxpayers for money. But we'll take 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of that. And we'll build a really top of the line supersonic capability that's extraordinary. And what the Chinese do is they steal the blueprints and they go build it at 1/10 the price in probably even that less time. And they've done that in a few serious capabilities. And that's because of our own foolishness, honestly. It's the problems that we have. And it's when you look at China, I mean, why wouldn't they do that, right? We have to get smarter. We have to get smarter at what it is that we are doing as a nation. And frankly, the last thing I'll tell you, just so I put this on the table, these endless wars that we are involved in, and all these, there's neocons, meaning conservatives, and there's neoliberals, meaning people on the left that love these endless wars. And until we stop these endless wars, we're in this cycle that is a tailspin heading downward to a massive crash, and that crash could be the end of this country.
So that was I wanted General Flynn about that issue, because you mentioned that China took over the world without lifting a weapon. Now, a part of that reason is because of the U.S. foreign policy, invading into many countries such as Iraq and basically, foreign wars, and China didn't have to go through that. So essentially, isn't it that it's the United States own the fact that it's because of the military-industrial complex that United States are in this situation in the first place?
So a couple of things, so for those that remember or know, that was an Eisenhower statement, right? Dwight D. Eisenhower, he warned about the military industrial complex. John F. Kennedy, before he was killed, he warned about really what I call the security state complex. And specifically, he was warning about the CIA. And now we have the censorship complex, right? Which was really, I thought, Michael Schellenberger, who did some of the Twitter stuff, did an extraordinary job, him and Taibbi. And
we've covered it. Lieutenant, we've covered it all here very, very closely. We've watched it also. So I agree with you.
Those are super, super important. So what we have done is our country, our bureaucracy, the complexes that I just highlighted, they are all sort of in one level, in one bin. And the longer we stay in a conflict, like I tell guys, and I wrote an article about this back in the early 2000s, okay, where I said that we get an A+ for participating in wars, but we get an F for winning them. And any crisis, you go back to 2000, whatever years, to go back to Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is one of the, he's really the original military theoretician, and he says any war that doesn't, result in victory and instead results in a prolonged affair is a loser for that side that prolongs that. In Afghanistan, just to give you one specific example, in Afghanistan, we spent more money in Afghanistan than we spent on the reconstruction of Europe after World War II in today's dollars. So the so-called Marshall Plan, right? The Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after the total destruction of Europe. We spent more money in Afghanistan, and look at where we stand there, right? Nowhere. So we're in a different place. We're in an unprecedented place, and everything that I'm talking about is all part of what we're on here tonight, really, to talk about it, which is this idea of 5th generation warfare. I mean, the Chinese have been masterful at infiltrating every institution of our country, and I don't know all the people that are on here, whether some of you are from America or not. I'm assuming that most are, but so when I say our country, I'm talking about America, the United States of America. So they have been masterful at that. They have also been able to grow very rapidly in the last 2.5 decades. I mean, the Chinese right now, I think, for those that understand the Belt Road Initiative, the Belt Road Initiative is now in 141 countries on damn near every continent. Okay, 141 countries. The extension of the Belt Road Initiative, Chinese are touching 141 countries. Roughly 80 to 85% of all major ports globally either are controlled by or the Chinese have some measure of control over 85% of the ports, the major ports around the world. So they've been doing all this stuff for the last 25 years while we've been participating in a never-ending war in the Middle East and Central Asia, which I have a lot of experience in, and and you can argue about what did you do when you could have done something. Believe me, we said a lot of things. But
General Flynn, just on that, I mean, isn't that
yeah.
the whole issue that basically the US spent so much money on basically fighting against farmers or people who couldn't really, in the entirety, ever be a real threat for the United States? And while that was happening, Russia and China have basically become dominant.
Yeah, anybody that wants to read about the overextension of the Macedonian Empire or Peter the Great, or the Athenian Empire and the Roman Empire, if you want to go there, the Persian Empire, all of them. One of the major indicators of all of their failures or their collapses was the overextension of their empires. They overextended themselves, and that overextension resulted in debt, heavy debt. Athens is a great example of where America is at the end of Athens. The end of the Athenian Empire is a great example. It's not perfect, but it's a great example of where the American Empire is right now. And just basically, it's severe debt, severe overreach on foreign policy and foreign affairs, and jaunts around the world to God knows for what reason. For no real objectives, and that's kind of where we are. If anybody on this broadcast here can tell me what the objectives are of this administration for Ukraine, the senile buffoon sitting in the White House, and I'll call him out. He hasn't gotten up on a teleprompter somewhere and said, here are the three objectives that we have that are vital national security interests for the United States of America to be involved in this mess that we're involved in, and to get off the stage on this point. And you have China cutting deals between the Saudis, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, and you also have the Chinese. Looks like they're cutting a deal between Russia and Zelensky in Ukraine. So is China the new leader of the peace movement, global peace movement? It looks that way.
So General, you would attribute that to this, because we've heard a lot about China in the and BRICS. That's been a huge topic that has come up here recently. A lot more people using the yuan. I know, obviously, Russia is now using the yuan to do a lot of the trade. It actually surpassed the U.S. dollar in trade for Russia. And that just came out a few days ago. But I mean, how do you reverse this de-dollarization here? I mean, is this something you believe that this is happening because of Joe Biden being in the White House, and that's why it was accelerated?
Yeah, it's intentional. Okay, so don't and I don't know a lot of you guys. I'm not sure I know any of you, but I get people that give me this sort of surprised, like they're surprised that this is happening. Like, how can we be here? How could this happen? And this is very intentional. There's nothing unintentional about what is happening to the United States of America right now. So the de-dollarization, and I don't know if you guys have talked about this on previous of these, but there's something called Executive Order 14067. Okay, Executive Order 14067 for those that are writing it down. It is essentially the central bank digital currency that actually was signed by Biden in March of last year, so a little over a year ago. It went into effect in December, this past December, and they beta tested it with government organizations and some corporations. Okay, so the idea of moving to a digital currency is not new. It's since the advent of cryptocurrency, but that's there's a lot of nonsense there. But this idea of a central bank digital currency, where we move to an and I'm trying to get the right word, but like an equity based system, meaning everybody kind of has the same amount of money. Everybody's going to have the same amount of money, or the government is going to control the money, your money, in an equitable way. That's what the Chinese do right now. The Chinese system, their social credit system, is severe. It's severe. We're moving to that kind of a system. So again, read Executive Order 14067. You'll understand what I'm talking about with central bank digital currency. This isn't some Chinese thing. This is the United States of America under this administration that signed off on it and is moving us toward that. So we are moving away from the U.S. dollar as the currency of choice for global trade and global goods and services around the world to something different, and it's going to look like what the Chinese currently have. Very, very dangerous.
General, I want to shift just a little bit here, because you did have an extensive military career. You're 33 years in the U.S. Army, served as a director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so Ukraine, I want to go to that a little bit. We saw Pentagon papers that were released, that were leaked several weeks ago now, that talked about the possible U.S. strategy and different intel that was being collected on the Russian advancements and what their plans were. In general, what were your thoughts on those? Do you think that they were real? Russia seems to not even think that these were
and on that, Nick, on that point, just breaking news a few minutes ago, while the general was speaking, Zelensky said that the White House told him nothing about the leaks. So he had no communication from the White House on the leaks. Just interesting. Came out by the Washington Post a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Interesting. And that doesn't surprise me. Whoever said the Sule, I guess you said that maybe, but that doesn't surprise me that Zelensky's in the dark. I mean, he's been in the dark from the beginning. I have not seen, I'm aware of those papers. I have not read them. And the reason why I haven't read them is because there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Part of it is because, because it's still classified information, so, and it's not a matter of me not talking about, something that's, that I can analyze and understand and talk about. It's just, I want to be able to look at things as they are happening and not look at the bullshit that comes out on leaks or from fake media, international fake media, or various, and I say fake, it's really just bias. It's incredibly biased media, most of which actually is censored. So, what do I think is happening in Ukraine? And I've been saying this from the beginning, and I said it before this engagement started, because you could tell that the engagement was going to start. And people can go to my website, generalflynn.com, and read all the articles that I've written about the war in Ukraine. This should have never happened. It should have never happened. Number one, because it did happen, and here we are. This is a losing fight for Ukraine.
Yeah, and General, how would you resolve this?
It's a winning. I was going to say it's a winning fight for the military-industrial complex, which also includes the NATO military-industrial complex. So don't just think that the Beltway bandits around Washington D.C. are the only military-industrial complex. NATO has a gigantic complex, and the money just keeps flowing in and flowing in. So as long as we prolong the conflict, at the expense of civilians and the expense of people dying, sadly, tragically, then the monopolies that control that and the people that control those levers of power, whether they're presidents, prime ministers, or dictators, they love having this. They want to foment more war, and fomenting war and keeping Russia as a boogeyman is good for the the war, the bank accounts, so to speak. War is a racket. So how do you end it? The first thing that you have to do, and China's already done it. Okay, China's already moved into a place where they've cut one of the largest economic and military deals between them and Russia, and they called up Zelensky and said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, what do you want to do? You want to die a young man, or do you want to get out of this and maybe maybe you can go into exile in some condo on the beach of the eastern shore of Maryland, okay, or go live in Florida or something. I mean, the Chinese are so smart about this, and they've already done this. So they've already done this. They're going to solve this problem, and I can tell you that the White House, so the leaders of Ukraine and Russia have entered into conversations in Washington, D.C., inside the White House and inside the State Department. They're actually welcoming that dialogue, okay? Because China is trying to de-escalate the nature of the war, which could really potentially move toward nuclear war.
So, General, on that point there, and I know there's a few other panelists that want to ask you questions, but first, just some numbers. In terms of manufacturing of military equipment, US is obviously number one at 732 billion, China at number two, and that's not military spending, that's manufacturing and export.
Yeah, but
China's at number two.
I hate to tell you, let me stop you because you can go through all those numbers, and I apologize because I'm going to run out of time here, guys. And so I want to stop you on that. Don't compare, don't compare the how much spending to each country. Compare what actually they do. So, like, if you compared the United States of America to a bunch of guys in shower shoes and bathrobes on the mountains and deserts of Afghanistan, there's no comparison. Yet we retreated under fire. Okay, so always be careful of those people that go, well, these spend $1 billion and these guys only spend $1. So we should be able to beat them. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the old adage of give me 300 and I can defeat 3 million. It's what the objectives are. It's what the purpose is. It's the nation's willingness, which has nothing to do with dollars. It has nothing to do with the number of tanks. Most people don't know that the Germans at the end of World War II, in the last month of the war for the Germans, they produced more tanks than they produced at any other time during World War II, because we weren't bombing the tank factories. We were bombing cities. We were burning cities to the ground in Europe at the end of World War II, because we got to the point where this war is never going to end. We want it to end. And so we burned the cities of Germany instead of destroying their military arsenals. And we dropped 2 atom bombs on Japan. The first one, the Japanese didn't surrender and weren't going to surrender after the first one. So it took a second one. So, this business about money, it's all really, to me, it's about willpower. And God, the best example is the Taliban defeating the greatest, not just America, but I think there was 49 nations that were organized at the end of that conflict that were all under the NATO umbrella. Where I'm at with war is we don't need war. And if you're going to go to war, I'm not against war. I'm just against stupid wars. And right now we have stupid wars, and we haven't even really, I didn't touch on what's happening in the Middle East right now, because what's happening in the Middle East is very, very dangerous.
So I've got to ask, I'm going to take the last question, General. We do have Mr. Cutler on stage. So once you jump off, General, Mr. Cutler, who helped you write the book, will be answering more questions if he's okay with it. Mr. Cutler, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks for having me on.
General, last question for you, because I know you have to jump off, is you did talk about China, you talked about Russia, we talked about the risks of a world war or nuclear conflict. And then you talked about AI as well, which is very concerning. And there's been some news today about regulators looking at how to regulate AI. What would you say is what worries you the most over the next 10 years? And worries in terms of, I'm going to go extreme and say for humanity, because there's concerns with AI and with the conflicts, the Ukraine conflict and the tensions in China, that could escalate to a global war. You're muted, General, just in case you didn't know.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Oh, good. No.
I was going to say, I really deeply appreciate being on here, and I apologize just because of my own piss poor scheduling. I'm going to have to jump off here in a little bit. But you just asked probably one of the most important questions that I've heard asked in a long, long time. And, the idea is, it's the things that we're not thinking about. So in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the things that we're not thinking about or what we get wrong today. So when we project something, we plan something and we say, well, we're going to plan on this happening. We're going to plan on inflation going down or gas prices going down or wars stopping. If what we plan doesn't happen and we don't have a scenario to deal with that, then we're in serious trouble. And so 10 years ago, we didn't plan to be where we are today. 10 years ago. And 10 years ago was 2013. And in 2013, Russia wasn't invading Ukraine. We were in Iraq and Afghanistan, obviously, and we were really, not doing well. But 10 years ago, we weren't thinking about kind of these unthinkable things. And so now you're asking a question about the same thing. So what are the unthinkable things? And so I'm one of these people. So I'm against globalism. Okay. I'm against it. If you were to ask me a set of 10 questions, I'd probably fall somewhere left of center in terms of my political ideology and how I think about things, and how I think about people and what their behavior is, which I don't really care about as long as you don't shove it down my throat. But I do believe in small government. I do believe in and I do believe in keeping prices down. So all those kinds of things. But the unthinkable now, where we're at, and this is why I'm adamant about, don't be surprised. Like, why is this happening? Why would these people want to destroy this beautiful country? Because that's what communism does. So the unthinkable today, for most people, for many Americans, is that, well, America will never be a communist country. It will never be a communist country. Well, so why is that unthinkable? And to me, that's not unthinkable. My life, my adult life, certainly my intelligence life, and my life getting to the places where I ended up, even though my time in the White House was short-lived because of some, just evil, but you don't get to those places because you're stupid. You don't get to those places because you don't understand certain aspects of what is happening. You don't run an intelligence agency because you're kissing somebody's rear end. Sometimes it might happen, but it rarely does. So what is the unthinkable? Well, the unthinkable is that America loses its shine. It becomes second fiddle to a global alliance. And I can tell you that because one of you mentioned the BRICS, right? Well, the BRICS right now is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but there are 10 other nations that are. I'm sorry. There are 20 other nations that have expressed interest in joining the BRICS alliance. 10 of those nations are, as far as I'm concerned, are already card-carrying members of the BRICS alliance. The BRICS alliance alone is 47% of the global population. Just the next 10 countries that I know are have joined, and certainly they're not in the camp of what Joe Biden says about, well, the world is against Russia. Well, the next 10 countries bring that number of global population up to just approximately over 70% of the global population. So we have an alignment, a global alliance that has formed, and the leader of that global alliance is China. And the unthinkable, when Barack Obama, as president, allowed the Chinese into the World Bank, okay, because the United States of America had to approve that. When they allowed him into the World Bank, thinking that, well, maybe we can, like Kissinger, Nixon, all the way back and all through, all presidents always say, well, if we just show them some more democracy, they'll be Democrats, right? Or they'll join the world of democracy. That's not how it works, folks. That's not how life works. It's not how the world operates. So the unthinkable is that the United States of America becomes second fiddle or third fiddle, and then an American form of socialism begins to seep in. And as I sit here talking to you all tonight, I mean, some days I feel like, some days I get up and I'm like ready to go to, I'm ready to charge and go get people to become precinct volunteers or something, right? But and I do that, but I am also trying to think strategically and add in the idea of history and how history can portend the future. We are looking at the next 10 years, and in those next 10 years, at the end of it, America could be essentially a quasi-communist nation led by an oligarch out of Washington, D.C. that Boone and I call the Uniparty, right? And that's not unthinkable to me anymore. It's not. I mean, I could go on and on. I do want to plug my website, generalflynn.com. For anybody that wants to go to it, you can buy a signed copy of the 5th GW, the 5th Generation Warfare book, or you can link yourself into Barnes and Noble. I want people to read it, and Boone you can talk about how we're translating this into German, Hispanic, and I think French too, coming up here very soon.